knowledge creation. So what we've been working on, John, Cuthell and I and Theo, lots of us, over several years, is knowledge creation and how we can share immediate knowledge. Everybody in this room is an expert on something or other in this area, and we're very keen to share that kind of knowledge. So the whole theme of today has been an ICT curriculum for the knowledge age. So what we're hoping is that all of you will have something to say on that. At the same time, we've got flash meeting here where members, sometimes we have up to 10, 15 members from, because we've got members in 80 countries. It does depend a little bit on the time of day, and if it's really important, our Australian colleagues will put a cocktail next to their computer at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is quite fun. So we've got people who want to contribute but can't actually be here. This is our presentation screen for those who've prepared presentations that they want to make today. And I'm going to keep a concept map here, just jotting down the ideas that come up. I'd particularly like to welcome Bill, who's come from the BCS, to join us. I've been trying to get you into one of our conversations for a long time, so I'm really pleased you found the time to come. Douglas is going to give, Douglas is going to talk about the maths part of this, but if anybody's, is there anyone else actually who's prepared a presentation? No, because it's very short, just an input, because what we're trying to do is to gather everybody's ideas. You've got a presentation, you've got something to say in particular, haven't you? That, wait a minute, I've got to find my programme, which is on here. So we've got Douglas, who was going to say something particular from the maths side, Iris, Bill, I've actually got Roger down in Andrea just to comment, because you were in the group, weren't you, as well? Yeah. One of the things, we had a 3-day conference at Bedford, and we had working groups in that conference where we talked a lot about, in groups, about what the ICT curriculum should be. It's not, oh, it's my phone, I think. I'll turn it off. It does seem to be reacting to phones. And the idea is that all of us put in a short contribution on our own ideas, and maybe I can sum up at the end on the concept map of the sorts of things that we think are really important as a group. So, could we start with you, Douglas? Mm-hmm. It does help if you've got a mic. Have we got the right roving mic as well?
I've got this one.
Yeah, but there's, if we have the roving mic as well, because
you can't have 3 of them.
Oh right. But the thing is that people listening from outside, it's hugely helpful to have really good sound quality.
Well, the logic is you switch yours off and be quiet.
You can tell we've worked together for about 20 years, can't you? I will do that, John. I will pass it on to someone else. Right, yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for this opportunity. It is probably the first time I've ever done a talk like this, not to mathematics teachers, although I'm aware that there's one lurking in the background there. Now, I thought it might be an opportunity to share some ideas about how ICT is making this fantastically interesting difference to the way mathematics is taught. Probably more so than just any other subject I could think of. And I've wandered into geography and economics lessons and so on, and they're looking at stuff, but they're not interacting in the same way that we do in mathematics. So I thought I'd just give you a little zoom through this. I have timed it for 5 minutes, so I hope it will be done in that time. So ICT and mathematics, where have you come from? Now I'm the generation, of course, that spent the majority of my teaching with just me and a piece of chalk, so that's me and a piece of chalk. Okay, and what's happened in the last decade or two? Well, the first thing to really come along was the projector, without which, I mean, I used to give training sessions and always say, who's got a projector in the classroom? And eventually, it's a lovely ogive, eventually everybody said they had. So this is now taken for granted. What it projects onto, of course, is very much up for grabs still. But there it is. And I use one of these, you see this little fellow down here, that's what I used, because it can be, you can take the lesson to anywhere, all corners of the classroom. At the same time, the most amazing myriad of software has been developed to really bring the subject to life. Most of you have probably last thought about mathematics seriously when you were in high school yourselves. That seems to be the way. But just imagine that if it had been taught using all these tools now, I think you would be quite a different person, really. And we've also got an incredible array of handheld calculators that are coming along. They've been around for a while. And then out of nowhere, this lot came. So, we have another completely different ballgame to contend with now. Some of these tools are incredibly powerful and do lots of things, but compared to computers, they're not yet very powerful. And so there are a lot of issues there. People think they're getting a computer and they're not really getting a pad. But anyway, it's there, and it's a challenge, like everything else. And what's come along at the same time, of course, is Web 2, the ability to communicate with everybody in both directions. This is where George Orwell got it wrong. He only got communication in one direction, didn't he? He didn't get the idea that people on the ground could also communicate back. And so teachers can now very easily share using something like Jing. Fantastic. They can learn from others with blogs. There are lots of amazing mathematics teachers who somehow do a busy day, mark all evening, and then start their blog at midnight. That certainly goes for Mr. Barton down the bottom there. Amazing guy. And the children can now learn on their own. Things like the Khan Academy, there's 25,000 videos there, of which a reasonable number are okay. I mean, there's no way that one person can produce so many videos of world-class quality. But perhaps it'll be peer corrected. Maybe people will say, hey, that's rubbish. My favourite is the one on histogram. Just look it up. It's complete tripe. But hopefully somebody will tell him that and change it. And the flipped classroom, there's a talk on, actually at this moment on the flipped classroom, and if I wasn't here, that's where I would be. Perhaps that's where everybody is. But that's an intriguing idea that you can actually use the teacher's skills to create videos which the people look at home. And then the class is the other way around the next day. It takes care of all the absences, problems, and that sort of thing. So my first task over the last few years has been to try and put some sense into internet resources. It is a fantastic array, growing by the minute. So this is my site, Technology for Secondary Maths, TSM Resources, and I've tried to organise it in such a way that it's in manageable chunks. So I've got one for the busy teacher. These are all the resources I've discovered that busy teachers haven't got time to find. I've also started a list of mobile apps. And then the actual mathematics spectrum itself, I've split up into the sort of government things, classroom resources, mathematical entertainment. These are two words you don't normally see in the same sentence, and yet there's a fantastic array of resources there to cheer up the math lessons, and then problem stats again likewise. So up there, if you're going to bring the whole world into your classroom, which you certainly can now, let's have a real pentagon. That was using SketchUp and Google Earth to produce that. Nice little exercise for the kids. There's an airport next door. There's the Washington National Airport, and of course every one runway on this planet has a number on it. It's a perfect tool for our lessons on directions and that sort of thing. So it's a wonderful resource. Then there's a real parabola you can get. I'll just save a bit of time and zoom in. The world's biggest parabola is sitting down here in Dungeness. There it is. It's an old military sound mirror from just before they invented radar. Thank goodness they did, because they were going to put these all the way down the south coast. But isn't that wonderful? There's a real parabola. So of course you can then start doing your analysis and watch things move around. You can see that point stays the same. Here's the sound coming in for the parabola, and wherever it hits, it bounces right through the same point. And what better way to show the focal properties of a parabola than to get a real parabola off the web and stick it into some software. Likewise, there's a nice Spain, there's a square in Spain, another parabola. Also the vanishing point. Yes? But Leonardo da Vinci didn't know about the vanishing point. So another nice little exercise. Can mathematics teach me in heart? My gosh, can it? Let's have a look. Here's the mystery of mathematics. This idea of the golden ratio. So this is a class I was taking actually in Queensland, and all these youngsters were given a ruler, and they had to measure their height and the height up to their belly button and stick it on a graph. And look at that, that's just amazing. 1.618. And then I said, well, go to the web and look up Parthenon. Well, what the heck's Parthenon? Never heard of it. They soon did, and of course the golden ratio popped up again. And one could go on and on and on, producing examples of that. Isn't it wonderful you can draw diagrams like this? Now, I spent most of my teaching life trying to do Boyle's revolution with me and a chalkboard and making a terrible mess of it. But now I can do all these fantastic things. Complex numbers sounds a bit complex, doesn't it? We used to spend most of our time saying that complex numbers are all very well, but you have to imagine them. But if you actually now, you've got the ability to have a complex plane, and you can see that complex numbers do in fact exist perfectly visibly in the third dimension. And complex numbers, of course, are the backbone of electrical sciences, and all the CGI effects and using fractals in the movies. There's plenty of applications. Likewise, 3D vectors and matrices. And the central limit theorem, I'll finish with this one because this is a nice one. Just have a look at some data. And why is it that they weigh the luggage when you're checking with an aeroplane, but they don't weigh us? Okay, it's a nice simple problem, but it's a lovely one to do. I've done this even with year 10s. I got some data from my local GP of 7,500 people. So there's the distribution from which we're now sampling 5 at a time to go on a small Cessna aeroplane. And look at the 5 there, well spread out. And so you end up with the average of each sample, and then you get a distribution of all the samples, and you get quite a wide spread. Now if you do that with 400 people though, if you do it with 400, something completely different happens. It looks very bizarre. You've got all those people getting on the aeroplane, and yet the average of that sample is very tightly, it's almost a whippet thing, look at that, the actual distribution of the averages. So the pilot of the aeroplane knows exactly the weight of the people who go on the plane. There's absolutely no need to weigh us. Obviously one would do that a little slower in the classroom, but you get the idea. It's possible to bring real mathematics in, but none of this will make any sense without continual professional development. And this is the workshop that I put on every year. We have a 3-day workshop. It's the opposite of conferences, and I think it's very important to realise this. But teachers don't really want to sit and listen like you have to me. They want to get on and put their hands on and really get involved in learning the software. And that's exactly what we're doing in Kiel this time. We've got details to talk about. There's a workshop in place. Now, I'm absolutely allergic to flying bullet points, but I couldn't resist. There's the software, there's the hardware, and without the training, that thing collapses. And I think that's a very important point to end on. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much. Iris?
Hi everyone, I'm Iris Lanny. I come from Oracle, which is one of the major technology companies worldwide, but I particularly work in the education initiatives. The education initiatives for Oracle are part of our corporate citizenship program. We work in a variety of areas, education being one of them. Environmental, we sponsor a lot of environmental corporate initiatives, and health corporate initiatives. But the education particularly, the reason we actually moved into education is if technology companies are inventing the technology which will be used by the students in school, then surely we should be the people who would develop some of the curriculum for that. Now, as I said earlier at an earlier presentation, no one person has all the answers. We all have a bit of the pie. But what we actually are doing in London over the next few months is we are running a teacher training course for Java Fundamentals. The reason we're doing the Java Fundamentals course is those of you who are familiar with the Raspberry Pi initiative will be aware that the Raspberry Pi comes preloaded with a program called Alice, which is animation, storytelling through animation, and Greenfoot, which is the 2D gaming programming, and will now come loaded with JavaFX. All of these are featured in our Java Fundamentals programs, so teachers will be able to, free of charge, get a hold of, get their head around this kind of technology before they have to work with the pupils in class with it. So it's free to teachers. It actually counts to as 160 hours CPD. It is currently being mapped to curriculum. So there will be, in Scotland, it's mapped to the curriculum in Scotland. And we're actually looking at curriculum and how we can actually fit it into the curriculum that exists. For teachers who do the course, there is, as I say, it's 10 weeks online. You get an iLearning account and you work through each lesson yourself. You're obliged to turn up for 1 hour per week with your adjunct and the rest of your teachers in that group to discuss any issues, to discuss any learnings, any findings, anything, support each other and help each other. And it finally ends up with 2 days in class. So there will be 2 days in class. It's great fun. You get a real idea of how the kids are going to learn. And in actual fact, we had a number of teachers doing the pilot for us last year who were very experienced Java developers, and what they enjoyed about it was actually it made them think like pupils again. So they really enjoyed that. As I say, it's entirely free of charge. I say to teachers, you can use some of it, none of it, all of it, any part of it you want when you get into class. Many schools are setting up computer clubs, and lots of them are actually using Java. Just for general information, I think everybody knows what Java is, but actually it is the most used programming language in the world, with over 9 million Java developers worldwide. I think C++ is the next, with about 6.5 billion as one single language. It covers things from different types of programming to, it covers almost everything, into kind of mobile apps. It will touch on, there are so many areas that Java touches on. It's free to download, so you can download and use it. That is presumably why it's the most used programming language in the world. It does not belong to anybody. Java does not belong to anyone. The reason we have developed the course is because when we acquired Sun Microsystems, we acquired stewardship of Java. So we've acquired a responsibility for it, but it doesn't belong to anyone. It is free, open source language for anyone. And there's amazing creative stuff online using Java. So we have an event in London next week at Reuters in Tech City, which is an information event about the Java course for teachers. Ollie Brook, stick up your hand, Ollie. If anybody wants to hear about the information event, please speak to Ollie. The course will start in April. We'll run April, May. The virtual part will run April, May and June. And the 2 days will be in class at the end of July, before the end of the summer term. That's all I want to say. If anybody has any questions about it, please ask me or Ollie. Thank you.
Thanks, Iris. One of the things I've taken out of that, I can't remember how to reduce this, I'll do it in a minute. I'm looking at the general ideas also that are coming out, and it's great to hear from maths and from computer program that are becoming much more strongly part of the whole knowledge thing. But one of the general ideas that you can't actually see at the moment, I'll pull it over here, is both of you have mentioned 3-day workshops, hands-on type workshops where people are generating ideas. And Marilyn Least, many of you will know, has just arrived, and it's something that we've been working on as well, but also with teachers as co-researchers trying to find out ideas. Bill, have you got any comments to make about on what's been said so far? These would be.
Well, I think the idea of supporting the teachers is the key one. I think BCS for a bit. Oh, sorry.
Bill is from BCS.
Yeah, I mean, supporting the teachers is the key one. Without them, nothing's actually going to happen. We support the Computing at School group, which has, I think, something like close to 2,700 members in it at the moment, and an awful lot of those are school teachers. And as far from everything I hear from when I talk to them, the big thing is supporting the teachers to deliver exciting stuff in the classrooms. So, fun enough, with Oracle in Scotland, we've been working with the Royal Society of Edinburgh to develop some classroom materials material. So that's going to be around app inventor. So and the Scottish Government likes this, and they've endorsed it for all schools over there. So next year, secondary schools in Scotland, all the kids will start learning how to program the game Bash a Millwall. Should be terribly exciting. Should enjoy that. But the point is that was actually developed by teachers, with other teachers, for teachers. So that was the key. In England, we've been setting up a network of teaching excellence, which the DfE are very nice to give some seed funding for. And again, the idea was to get teachers working with each other and working with computer science departments at universities. This is going quite well. We've got 600 schools in that, and 77 universities have so far expressed an interest in sort of joining up to help with that. And what we've found is that for school teachers, A, they get access to real experts in our university computer science departments. B, they get to find out really fun stuff. C, their head teachers get to have a big smile on their faces because their ICT teacher is now going down to the university in their town and getting mentoring and help and support from their computer science department. And the computer science departments are happy because they've suddenly realised that they have a pool of potential students for the future sitting on their own doorsteps. So everybody's a winner. So it works really well. Sorry, I've started wishing on about all our stuff, but basically supporting the teachers to do stuff, to empower them to innovate and do exciting things and connect with each other is really, really important.
What came out of that was links with the universities in particular, that your work. It doesn't matter if people talk about their actual developments first of all, and then I thought we'd try to distill some ideas about what fits into the knowledge economy. I mean, Bob this morning talked about poetry, so so maybe we need to. I can do that one. That's all right. I can manage that one. But Andrea, would you like to say what you're doing?
So if we had a Venn diagram, I would probably be somewhere in the intersection between pure mathematics, computing, computer science, and the engineering space. Now, you know, I'm here basically representing Texas Instruments. Texas Instruments employs about 30,000 people worldwide in various capacities, largely highly numerate people, so lots of engineers. And then from engineering, you know, things have to branch out into product management, business, general business, research, all kinds of different areas. And we have divisions that you know, do things like RFID, radio frequency ID, different semiconductors, and then our education division, which is essentially the part of the business that a lot of people in schools are aware of, that supplies educational tools for STEM subjects, mainly maths and science. Now, that is actually only 5% of the business, but it's an incredibly important part because it's part of this virtual circle of, we're talking about supply, and you know, Bill, you made a good point about the fact that your computer science departments will then realise they have this pool of students. Now, in the engineering space, it's all about talent and it's all about innovation, and companies stay competitive by filing patents and having innovative chips and innovative processes and products and components that can then be put into other products across all different sectors. And those have to be developed by people who have ideas. So it's not enough to have skills. And I think the really important thing for us as an organisation, whether it's in our educational tools or in our component manufacturing sector, is we need people who don't just have skills, that they could do some basic programming, or that they're highly numerate, or that they understand how normal distribution works. Those are all important things that you would expect from someone with sort of basic secondary education. But there's also a lot of interference.
It's somebody's. It'll be a phone.
Yeah.
Just return mine.
You're turning yourself
Yes,
off.
it is mine.
Yeah.
But
Oh
also,
dear.
yeah.
Sorry.
Interference. Anyway, we were talking about radio frequencies and things, weren't we? So ultimately, it's really about being realistic also as to what this knowledge economy actually implies in terms of types of jobs and skill sets that are required. The area I see that's interesting, I mean, the topic of this session was going to be, you know, ICT curriculum for the knowledge age. The thing I'm interested in is, you know, what does that actually mean? Because, you know, knowledge without, you know, knowledge actually derives value from being applied or being interpreted. There are, of course, types of knowledge which are worth having as general knowledge, but essentially, in a productive economy and in an environment where you're hoping that people are going to be able to sustain themselves into the future, you need to have people who can apply knowledge and apply skills. And a lot of our curriculum relating to, say, ICT or relating to mathematics, unfortunately in the UK, has focused on just knowing stuff, often without a very clear link as to how that could be useful or how that could be applied. So some of the examples Douglas showed, where you had something quite concrete to answer a question or a problem, are engaging and more useful ways of teaching certain topics than perhaps just teaching them in an abstract way. What's interesting, I mean, there is some flicker of hope because the government is listening to Timothy Gowers and people like that who essentially are saying that, what has previously happened with the curriculum, such as use of mathematics, was that it focused very much on creating a contrived situation to fit a certain piece of mathematics, which actually wasn't realistic and turned a lot of kids off what they were supposed to be learning. Whereas it's more about saying, well, what is a scenario or what is a real problem that needs to be solved, and how could that be solved mathematically or technically, as a general question. So I think that's incredibly important. Ultimately, just to sort of conclude, we're really, what we're looking at, whether it's, mathematics, engineering, computer science, is creating creators and innovators and people who understand construction and deconstruction of interfaces, rather than just turning into a nation of users and consumers. And I think this is where the big danger is that we have kids who are seen to be technically literate because they're good at using devices. Most of the time they have no idea how those devices work. They don't know how Google works, they don't know how they give away a lot of data, they don't know what's happening with their data. Their data is being monetized by companies who do know what they're doing with it. And I think that we're looking at a situation where also socially there is an obligation here as well. It's not just about saying we need a productive workforce. There's also an issue of citizenship and the right to be an informed citizen and not to be preyed on essentially by governments and larger corporations such as Google, for example, who are monetizing information that is being given away freely because people aren't aware of how that actually works. So I think, subjects like mathematics need to be seen as empowering basic skills, such as speaking and reading and writing, which unfortunately in the UK is not really a very common perception in secondary schools. We're one of the only developed countries that allows kids to stop mathematics at the age of 15 or 16, because I think this connection between fundamentally mathematics as a language and as an empowering skill has not been made clear and explicit, and where everything has an interface. I mean, Iris earlier on was saying, every single thing, whether you're doing transport, whether you're taking a train, whether you're in hospital, whether you're banking, how you get paid, all of these things require some level of program, some level of computer interface, and that's not going to change. The issues we have in the future, energy, sustainability, transport security, environment, all of those things will require interfaces and programs, and people who understand how those things work will essentially be controlling them. So there's a deeper social issue also of empowerment at stake. So I've probably talked for too long, but
I'm putting it all down.
Happy to pass on.
What I'm trying to do on the left-hand side is pick up some of the bigger ideas that are coming out, plus the detail, because it's very interesting to me that when I first started teaching, well, it was called IT. I'll take that. It was called IT in the 1980s, and Croydon was where I live, is one of the first places to develop IT skills. And when I started, the school asked me to front it, and we didn't even have any computers, and we used books explaining information skills. And I said, why me? Can't you give it to the maths department? You know, aren't computers something to do with maths? And they said, well, actually, and this isn't true, Douglas, mathematicians can't explain things to people. We want you, as an English teacher, to explain. And I said, well, even I do actually need to understand what I'm talking about before I explain it. And the first thing that happened was we got a special computer suite, and I was given a computer handbook on the Friday, and I was told I was teaching 11-year-olds computing on the Tuesday, and I spent the weekend reading this handbook and taking out words like save, delete, which I wrote on flashcards. They gave me the password for the computer room. I opened the door and 30 children swept past me and sat 2 to each computer and were already on the keyboard, and I'm saying, stop, 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 don't touch anything, I don't know what's going on. They all had their backs to me because the power had been put round the outside, so all the screens were facing outwards, and they were perfectly happy. And I thought, I don't know quite what I'm doing here, maybe I ought to go and make a cup of coffee or something. And ultimately, because we were teaching English, after about 6 weeks of me holding up delete and save and the children rushing off doing goodness knows what, they said to me, we were making a magazine in English. Aren't we supposed to use these things to make magazines? And that got me to understand, you know, that all the things that you were talking about have got to be all pulled together. That you can't just do one thing or the other thing, that it's a very complex approach. And in fact, as soon as we started to go back to doing a magazine, they were all teaching each other. I mean, one of them, before we started this, she said, I'm bored, miss. And I said, I'm twice as bored as you. I haven't even got a computer or a keyboard or anything. And that's how the idea of making a magazine came out. And I think we've learnt so much since then, but somehow the importance of we were told, I mentioned in the other one, we were told when we designed the first ICT curriculum, don't put programming in. The companies asked us not to because they said the teachers won't be able to keep up and the programming languages won't be right, which was true in the 80s, but not now, when there's much more, it's much easier to do. And the point I'm trying to make here is that we have a wonderful opportunity here in the knowledge age, as is coming out of this conversation, to pull things together and say, you even need people like the Preston, who came up from the narrative storytelling linguistic side, but as somebody pointed out, maths is another language. And I don't think we've been nearly clear enough. I've learned French and German, and so do most people of my generation. We didn't think of maths as a language. And I think the idea that people need to be involved is really important. We've got the idea here that we need a problem to solve, and we spend 3 days solving it. A really exciting idea and opportunity. So, I didn't take any notes for myself while I was on that, but Marilyn, you come forward, Marilyn. And there's a
question to you can use a couple
Yep.
of mics.
right.
Oh, thank you. I sit here and I feel we're at the beginning of something new and changing, you know, the curriculum's changing and so on. And is it going to be the same as what it was before, where lots of ideas get thrown out and nothing gets really properly tested and nobody really knows which approaches have maximum benefit to children and which don't? Now in the past, I can see why it happened. It was much harder for us to communicate and share, and, you know, so we all experimented in our own places. But now it's not like that. You've got a network of 700 teachers, was it?
600 schools.
600 schools,
77
right?
universities.
Yeah. So we've got 25,000 schools in the country, workforce of 1.4 million, never going to be enough money to train those people in any way except using online and, you know, smart ways that we can now. And I just wonder,
collectively, there's a lot of people in this room who really know what could be done, whether we couldn't start off this initiative somewhat differently. So if I just take your network, for example, it's run by the BCS.
No.
No,
The
it's
BCS
run by...
it's run by the schools and the universities. We're just helping them to get it going. It's up to the
Right.
schools and universities
Okay.
how they do it. So we're just
Fine.
encouraging them, supporting them.
Yeah, I wasn't... I was actually using the BCS as a good example, because what many of us have seen in this room is a lot of networks set up by Vector, which folded overnight. And we must learn that lesson. We can't let any of the knowledge, any of the things that we build, be held by a government when it can be turned off overnight like that. So I was rather hoping that your network was supported by the BCS, which would mean there's a professional association there. You may not describe yourself as that, but where what lasts? Schools last, universities last, professional associations last. And it's that group of people who need to put in place this lesson about, first of all, how we can use technologies much more effectively to share the knowledge, build the knowledge, test the knowledge out, but also to own the knowledge so that we never again get put in this position where we just lose everything with the flick of a switch overnight.
So when I said we don't run it, what I mean is we're not trying to tell teachers how to teach. We're trying to find out from the teachers what they want to do and then help them spread the word and get the help in there from the universities.
Yeah. So here you've got an opportunity, because we're all able to access this network, I'm sure, to actually use new research techniques to crowdsource information about what really is working and making a difference to children's learning. So imagine if we had, with a network like that, research topic of the month, those of you using Raspberry Pi, can you do this activity this month and watch what happens, record it in this way, and we will see at the end of that what the collective understanding is about the effect of this on children's learning. That's the kind of thing we can do.
And we should say that when Google said they were giving away 15,000 Raspberry Pis, 2,000 of them are heading our way. So yes, so we'll have a few of those to do something.
Oh well, there's a group of us who know the techniques for doing this sort of research. And I think if we can start working that way in the education system, we're going to be much, much more powerful around our own knowledge and much more.
I think, to be fair to the DFE, I think this is what they want to happen. I think the reason they've now got this super lightweight, the new curriculum coming out is 2 pages. It's just amazing. I think the point of it is to allow this sort of thing to happen. And so I actually think they're doing something right.
I agree with you. The stepping back is allowing us to step forward, but we must step forward quickly because I've already heard that one of the government agencies is starting to fill the space up and put money into stuff that actually we had before was lost before. So
that's what government agencies do, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Well, what the medics have done much more successfully, I think, than education, they've managed to get that money into projects which are run by the medical sector, and that's what we need to be able to do collectively, work much more effectively collectively. Anyway, it's kind of, we can thresh out the details outside this discussion, but please you're enthusiastic about that. I'm haunted by the children who leave school not being able to do basic addition, subtraction and so on. I'm going to stop in a minute, but I'm just going to move on to a project I'm talking about on Friday, which is mapping the knowledge we've got, using the web and producing knowledge maps. So we're only 15 years after the medics, some of you know about this already. Anyway, I've been talking to some adults about it, and you won't believe the things people are telling me. These are not educators. Somebody said to me, would we make sure that we include subtraction because they never got it? These are people in senior positions. They never got it. They don't want people to know they haven't got it, but they've got a big black hole. And I've had this, not just in maths, but if we take maths, I've had adults say it to me about subtraction, long division, fractions. Now, it's ridiculous in this day and age that people can't go click, click, see a few explanations, pick the one that works for them, and run a few exercises and test themselves. And get it, little. That's the kind of thing we could do collectively and lift this tale of underachievement. Make resources available, evidence-based, make them easily accessible for personalised learning. There you go. I'll shut up.
Just a very quick follow-up on that. We've taught algorithms.
What say you are?
Peter Ashmore, thank you, Carl.
I know.
I'm the new head of a school called the Europa School in Oxfordshire, replacing an existing European school and following a similar curriculum.
Could you just repeat your name?
Peter Ashmore. We've been teaching algorithms for years. I can remember a terrible story when the national curriculum first came out. I beg your pardon, no, it was the review, Mathematics Counts. And one of the conclusions of this review was that perhaps we didn't need to teach the algorithm for long division anymore. And it was no less a person than Margaret Thatcher who intervened and said, I did long division when I was at school, it's got to be in the curriculum. When people say that they don't know subtraction, they don't know division, they don't know long division, what they are saying is they've forgotten the algorithm. But what they really mean, or what we should see as educators, is they never understood what the algorithm did. And I was listening this morning to Carol Vorderwald presenting Pearson's latest software. And I'm not convinced that Pearson's software does what she was talking about, but she made one very interesting point in the middle of this presentation. She spoke of some research that was done, I believe, in China with people performing mathematics while having their brains scanned. And those who have been educated in the East had 2 centres of activity, and those who have been educated in the West had 1. And the extra activity in the East was visual. That's where computers contribute so much to mathematics teaching. Suddenly we can see what's happening. We can move things around even in 3 dimensions and begin to understand the real concepts behind it. And to be perfectly honest, I don't mind if it's completely pure mathematics, because I think the abstract thought involved is a very important skill. But it can also be extremely applied and very practical. I think both are important, but the key thing is that we get children to understand why an algorithm is there. At the end of the day, if all they can do is apply the algorithm for long division without understanding it, they might as well use a calculator. They're no better off.
So what you've actually said there is that one of the things we can do in the new curriculum is generally offer much more visual learning. It's something that we've done a lot of research into, and Theo and John in particular, and we are finding more and more the modelling, the visual, that whole area is something that allows us to dig deeper with learners into these things. So I'll put that up there as one of the key points. It's not quite adding the visual, but I mean it's animation, it's a whole multimodal thing, but it is fascinating when we look back on our own childhoods and realise how little was available visually. And when I see my 6-year-old grandson, I can confidently say is a very good photographer. He absolutely knows what's going to be interesting to other people. I've now bought him a digital camera, I give him my digital camera. That would have, when you think, when we were young, owning visuality like that just was never possible. So I'll put that up.
The other point though is to actually explain to kids that there is, sorry, I mean the other thing about long division is it's a single algorithm to achieve a particular outcome, whereas there are actually there are umpteen billion different algorithms for doing long division. I mean one of the things that we were keen to stress for the new ICT curriculum when we're putting it together is that kids should be taught what algorithms are from a very early age, and they should be taught that actually there are multiple algorithms for achieving the same objective, and that you can actually look at those algorithms and compare them and actually assess which one might be best for a particular context. But I think that would be quite useful in a mathematical context, because you're getting away from that idea that you are learning an algorithm. Long division is this algorithm. So, there are lots of algorithms and you just have to pick one. I think that's quite a good, very important point that kids should appreciate.
I think interestingly when you're doing green food stuff,
I think interestingly when you're doing greenfoot stuff, and lots of teachers are very keen on the greenfoot stuff, that covers algorithms. So when youngsters are developing games, they get the understanding, and that's quite exciting for them. They can see the outcome of an algorithm, and it's theirs, and they get to create it. And I think that's quite, key.
Yeah.
Things like that, using programs like that to teach math, to help increase.
Brilliant thing about if you write your own algorithm for a game, it usually isn't a very good algorithm. So it might actually do the thing you want it to do, but then you think that's not very good, and you need to start to improve it, and that is a marvellous thing, I think.
But if you start learning at 10 and 11 and 12 how that works, by the improvements that you get then, if that's core to you, then you will look for improvement. You will be curious enough.
Why not 6? Why not like primary school?
I'm delighted. The earlier the better, I think. Yes.
I think one of the things that
Ian, take me.
one of the things we get with all these nice discussions about process and algorithm and things is, well, what actually motivates children to learn anything? And quite often it's the context and whether it makes sense to that individual. And we never talk about context. In fact, most of the context is removed. When I used to teach physics and science, we taught people how the monochrome meters work, and then they became obsolete because we've got digital meters now and so on. It was never the travel carryover to teach people how modern digital technologies work, like an optical drive, or how lasers change the magnetism of a disk drive, how a magnet goes through a disk drive. The reason is partly because the teachers never got taught that themselves, because they've been learning analog things and had never been retrained. So of course they stopped teaching it, and a new generation of teachers don't teach it either, because they didn't learn that context. But that's just an example. I mean, whatever we hang it on, the difficulty with context is quite often what motivates the individual isn't going to motivate the next one in the class, and certainly possibly isn't what's going to motivate the teacher, because they're adults. So you're saying, well, we do brute force at age 10 or 9 or 8. It's not doing brute force or doing scratch. It's the context that scratch is actually developed in that will motivate the child. And in a way, it's not down to whether that's a complex algorithm or whatever. It has to just make some sense to solving something in that child's mind that they're interested in. And I think if we were to put something on that, I'm not exactly sure how we would phrase it or do it, or how the research would work. I'd be very interested to know how much contextual factors are involved in motivations. Because there's no doubt most people outperform what the limitations others put on them if they're motivated. A lot of people leave school with no qualifications, do fantastic things outside, and think, well, how come they never passed any GCSEs? You know? Look at Jackie Stewart, he left school, ran businesses and made millions off businesses.
Bob Geldof.
Bob this morning was absolutely clear on that one. The only thing he really mentioned was how useful learning poetry had been. Which I saw a few people think, oh my God. Right, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Here's a little bubble that says the curriculum. Okay? Let's have almost all of you, I'll let some of you off, but almost all of you, what needs to be in there? Obviously, people might say yours, but can you come up with one bubble?
Is it ICT curriculum or the curriculum?
No, the ICT curriculum for the knowledge age. What we did earlier on today was we discussed the 2-page one that we've put into the consultation, and also NACE, in terms of what we think will be most acceptable to put into that consultation at the moment. But
is it worth mentioning that the DFE got the expert advice from the British Computer Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering, thanks to input from groups like MirandaNet. That's been published. They will soon publish their own version based on that expert advice, and there will then be a 3-month consultation where everybody can dive in and say what they want.
Well, what we're hoping, what we now want to do, and this is a map where I can give you all ownership of the map and you could put stuff in afterwards. What we'd like to do now, we saw a difference between what we were doing for the consultation to meet the immediate possible stuff that teachers can do now, and what we wanted to do here was say, if we didn't need to train teachers, if they were superhuman and could do anything we want them to do, what what is it that we're working towards? What does the knowledge age need? And we know that some innovators will be there already, but what kinds of things do we think should be part of that? So can we just brainstorm on that now, rather than, you remember the old 5 strands that used to be in the ICT curriculum, all that sort of thing. What we're looking for now is what's essential for preparing for the future, possibly that we don't yet do. So, anybody want to put something in there?
I've got a dangerous one.
Yeah.
I know that I can make this machine do something that it isn't doing it at the moment.
Right. So, shall I just put that in as a phrase, because we can all get into it, right?
It's a concept, if you like, even for
It's engineering, isn't it? I know that I can make this machine, say it again, do something
that it isn't doing at the moment.
that, I'll correct this afterward, that it is not
Can't
doing.
just say hacking.
Sorry?
Yes, good word.
Hacking.
Hacking.
Or
Hacking.
robotics, essentially, isn't it? It's kind of robotics.
Okay, let's say hacking.
Machine might be an abstract machine.
I know we're
Yeah,
brainstorming, but I'll just give you
Yeah.
the origin of that thought, which was when I was a student working in a bank. There were 20 of us dividing every single number on a massive printout by 2, because the computer science department had told the bank manager that the computer could only print out stamp duty at 2% and not at 1%, and he believed them.
Right, so that's exactly, I see where you're coming from now. That was a helpful
And I suppose you
addition.
have, I also understand that what computer scientists tell you is often bullshit.
Well, in earlier conversations today, we were saying some of that is because they have a comfort zone they want to stay in. We all have those sometimes, but we're not, no comfort zones here. What is it that learners need to know in the knowledge
Is
age?
there any research as to what the impact of the BBCB was? Because it struck me that it was profound. Because the programming language it had BBC Basic, you could evaluate expressions. It was a brilliant piece of software. And the whole generation of young people became today's programmers. I mean, I'm going through them, I have to tell you. I mean, they all learned.
Did they, or did the brightest 15% become programmers and the other 85% never get anything?
Well, I dare say you've got to be clever to code.
But if you could, 15% of every generation with that, it's a significant number.
Sorry, I'm being rather selfish.
I know.
I'm thinking my own son who's 15 who is not in that 15%, and I'd rather like him to get a rather good education in sort of computing and maths as well. So, you know, he does something amazing, and rather than just that 15% of which he is not. This isn't being recorded, is it? Because if he gets to see this on the web.
Don't tell him, don't tell him. I mean, one of the things I'd like to say is you were all talking about algorithms. I've had a purely arts education, and only when I've been working with Czech colleagues in the late 1990s did my colleagues who are actually very computer literate, the computer science people talked about algorithms, and I said, what's an algorithm? I mean, shouldn't I know?
Yes.
I really
So
didn't.
terminology,
Yes.
e.g. algorithms.
And I was fascinated when they told me. Same with science, if it's not in a...
Recipes of algorithms.
Recipes to make, cakes and things. I mean, they're all simple algorithms.
Knitting
Just
patterns.
logical sequences.
Knitting patterns, yes.
I think practical as well, and I think that is absolutely key. And the reason I say that is at this point in time, we have the highest youth unemployment. These are guys who are just out of education, and we have the highest number of unfilled technology jobs.
And add to that practical useful from the perspective of the learner. Because
Yes.
if it isn't, they won't do it. Well, they won't do it.
Oh yes, yeah, but definitely practical, because I don't think it's, if we're putting kids through the education system only for them to leave and not be able to get a job at the end of it, I don't think that's necessarily the best approach.
I think what's very misleading is that in this country there are these big, very big social and class divisions to do with the maintaining of private sector and private sector unfortunately, what's very misleading is there are schools and teachers and universities working to this level of excellence. But what we're talking about, what the problem is there's somehow this divide then that just immediately becomes inaccessible to people who are not in that group.
Yeah.
And so the assumption is made, you know, if people are in that group, they make a lot of assumptions about it being accessible and that this is what everyone is doing, and they just need to go and do it. But actually, this is not accessible to a lot of people in the maintained sector who have a right. I mean, I do see it as a sexual empowerment issue, and I would add to the curriculum. I think that, you know, software engineering should be taught from primary.
Yeah.
That might be a bit radical, but you know, if
We're radical at the moment.
if we're honestly going to say, do we want people to be socially empowered, active citizens for the types of jobs that they're going to be in 10, 20 years' time, every single product, every single interface, whether you are using a toy, whether you are buying a drink, whether you are driving your car, has a programmed interface, has components.
And actually, and just as we were kind of speaking about earlier, if you decide to go to university and study any subject, we had a number of senior lecturers that did both database and Java fundamentals courses with us, not because they're computer scientists, and they're not, very senior lecturers who realise that they have to teach their students some programming because the students have to produce a thesis which has some research, and they have to either develop and test research or quantify research, and the easiest way to do that. So that was every other subject apart from computer science they did them.
We did put in the curriculum, the expert advice is not a dear thing. We did say that by Key Stage 3, children should be taught to think about why their algorithms and their programs are correct, and they ought to be able to articulate that and explain to other people why they're correct. But we didn't put it in at primary. Do you think this ought to be down at primary
Yes,
level?
I think at primary, because fundamentally that's when kids are open to anything. That's when they ask the big questions. That's when they ask questions like, you know, how come ants can carry, you know, 20 times more than their body weight or whatever. Kids will ask open-ended, curious questions about all kinds of things, a lot of which have, you know, answers that could require a little bit of program, a little bit of modelling. And I think that, you know, that's when, why not? I mean, we teach kids some basic scientific principles.
Sorry, you mean
you know.
for them to create the program as opposed to reason about why the program works?
Yes.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
No, right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think being introduced to it in a simplistic way. I mean, there's some very nice little programs, say on Scratch. There's the cats one. You know, there's I can't remember the name of it.
The cat's the main logo, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a, you know the one I mean?
Yeah, describe it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, where there are 8 and 9-year-old kids working with programming these little cats to have these little things on, these little interactions on there. There are these things that are happening, but essentially it's just pockets of activity encouraged by their environment. But I do think we have an issue of perception as well in this country to do with, you know, who has access to these things, and you know, kids who are bright will, you know, they're going to do it anyway. But you know, other kids don't necessarily need to know it, and I think that that's wrong. I think that fundamentally, you know, in 10 or 20 years' time, every single thing will have an interface. We will actually, you know, if you read Ray Kurzweil and people like that, we will have interfaces inside of us. You know, we won't be carrying around, you know, people won't be staring into screens and carrying around pieces of plastic. We will have, you know, glasses with interfaces. We will have chips inside of us. Shouldn't we know how those things work from a very early age?
If we don't all know how Google works, and we're being taken for a bit of a ride. What did you say? Computer ethics, absolutely. We need to stop here, but we're nowhere near the end of this conversation. There are several people here who aren't members of MirandaNet, and what I'd like to do, if you can join for free, if you're not, and what I'd like to do is put out the connections for this map, say in 2 weeks' time, when everyone's had a chance to join. You'll probably be lying in a darkened room next week, but after that. And I'll put this map out for you to add things to. What I think this section here needs, I loved what you said it's Peter, isn't it? Yes. Because you couched it in what the child or what the learner was doing. I know that I need to make this machine do something that it's not doing at the moment. And then I added hacking, robotics, engineering. I think that's rather a nice formula. So if we could all actually go into that area and try and put that kind of question in, where would the learner feel that they are, and what sort of things do they need to draw from that? That would be great. If you all put one in, look, it's easy to add. Can you see? That's all you do. You put your cursor where you want to add something. Now you can all do that, can't you? If Preston can do it, anyone can do it. I promise you.
I mean, this sort of way to explore knowledge, isn't it?
Yes.
So I suppose it relates slightly. I mean, this sort of thing we could be doing as a whole class activity, and it links in very much, you know, so people could see what the algorithms of how knowledge is actually being generated within a group, and that's another approach. I can't understand myself why we use this tool all the time. We don't often. I went at school to see teachers doing mind maps and paper, and then
We've had
the old days
this.
they used to write up their work process.
This is a MindMeister map, which is freely available to all of you. I actually have I use it so much I pay a subscription because I can have more than 6 maps. But you can all join in, and when we've prepared a topic beforehand with members, they are joining in from other countries as well and adding to this. And so it's a wonderful way of actually pulling together some ideas. But it seems to me that we do need to think not only about what is immediately possible, but where should we be going and what should we be doing and how can we do it. And Marilyn's point, we're very much involved with this knowledge creation. We were shocked to the core when in the first week of the new coalition they took down all the websites. It was everything, all our research, which we're having to reassemble. Bob mentioned Teachers TV, which we're having to reassemble. Marilyn actually has developed a site where all this stuff can go, which is owned by the universities and other people who want to be involved. But it is terribly important that we never let that happen again. And most of it was ignorance, actually.
Yeah, it was ignorance. It's different what we're doing now. It's
Yes,
next
And
week.
there's another thing for your bubble in the ICT and the ethics curriculum.
Yes, ethics.
Ownership, copyright, and preserving digital objects.
Yes.
in the public domain.
It's unlike a library where you know there's going to be a moth-eaten copy of something. It's not happening.
Wikimedia seems to mind from Wikipedia. It's absolutely massive. On relatively small amounts of money.
Yeah.
We had School Forge UK. Vector killed that on the Schools Open Source project. Whereas what's that doing now? Nothing.
Which one was that?
School Forge UK was basically
School Sport.
School Forge UK.
School
It's like
Sport.
SourceForge, which produces all the open source applications and stores them all on the internet. School Forge was for similar purpose for schools. But Vector put something like 150,000 into a project, which half of it got spent on administration, as it usually does, called the Open Schools Project. As soon as Vector disappeared, that and Schools Forge is dead. They've actually done harm. It's not just that they've disappeared, they've killed the whole of that initiative.
Well, we're working very hard on this never happening again. So we need to. Yes.
It's just it's so interesting doing these things, isn't it? You get all sorts of ideas, and you guys are sitting there from industry, and I was thinking about keeping the curriculum updated and so on, and children not knowing that these jobs are available, because children actually don't know that you want them. What could we do? Because the technology just allows us to do everything differently. I mean, it wouldn't be hard, would it? We'd have an annual forum of companies who are in this field every year, get together, virtually or whatever. And you do it, do you?
No. Part of the reason we don't is because we
No, we don't. Educational focus. What's the latest we need to update in the curriculum?
And the reason it doesn't happen is it would take not just the technology industry to come together, because technology jobs don't exist only in technology
No,
companies.
no.
Yes.
Technology jobs exist in banks, in the music industry, the film industry, the retail
Fashion,
industry, the
massive
fashion
fashion
industry, the
technology
transport industry. You name an industry, these technology jobs exist in it. I think part of there was an e-skills report came out earlier this tail end of last year. Sorry, I forgot we're in the new year. And the tail end of last year, which did say there would be the 750,000 technology jobs becoming available in Europe over the next year or so.
How do children get to hear this? How do young people get to hear it? You know, I just
Well, maybe they could start by, you know, employing people at the BBC programming who aren't all arts graduates, and maybe, or maybe understand how, you know, some of this stuff is delivered, and actually have a little bit more exposure on television. One of the things I found very interesting is just over the last few years, the awareness, say, because of programs like Numbers or CSI, of the fact that doing science could lead you to interesting work in, say, forensics or something like that. Now, that is a massive shift in perception of something that maybe a lot of kids wouldn't have thought about before. It suddenly becomes a little bit more interesting. Again, because they're actually solving problems using this stuff. Similarly, you know, there's the Brian Cox phenomenon. He's going to be here on Friday. People are suddenly saying, oh, this is actually really interesting stuff. Now, why is it in a country where we struggle so much with physics? I mean, physics has just suffered massively in this country, and that's a problem with trying to recruit engineers as well. So, I mean, you know, why is it in a country where we really suffer dramatically at schools, where physics has almost become the preserve of private schools? There are masses, I think it was 2,000 schools in the maintained sector who do not have a physics specialist on staff.
That's 2,000 out of 5,000 secondary. So
I mean, that is really dramatic. And yet, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of people all over the country are tuning in and saying, oh, this is really interesting stuff, I'm really enjoying this. Because it's being presented to them in a slightly different way.
A new computing curriculum, if you actually get the kid doing it from primary school, unlike physics, where actually it's hard to get to the doing part. With the computing, you can do it age 5, 6, 7. You can do Scratch, then you can do Java, then you can do Python. And you can do all this stuff.
But again, you see, with physics, it's about asking the right questions. You know, you say, okay, the sun's 93 million light years away, or whatever. Wow, well, you know, what does that mean? How do you even calculate that? You know, then you can start to talk about light, you can start to talk about interesting things. It's all about what question you ask.
It's no more difficult to teach primary age kids physics at the level you're teaching them computer science. The difference is you're a computer scientist, and if you're computer science, I'm a physicist, so I'll probably say, so all those subject specialists will say their subject can be done, and they can, if it's inappropriate.
Should we have to take all of these core subjects and bring them right down to primary school?
Galinda, you wanted to say something and we really must stop.
I actually was talking to some person who's writing an article, and I was actually asked what's the biggest issues, and I said, well, obviously the problem is the talent, trying to recruit people in. And she said, why? And I said, it's a completely different scenario on the west coast of the US. And she said, why? And I said, well, on the west coast of the US, the celebrities are the geeks. You have these people, so, you know, they're people who are well respected in society, and people are trying to emulate that and trying to get there. If you open up any of our newspapers or the mainstream things like Evening Standard, etc., how often do you read an article about some celebrity person in the startup world who's achieved something?
Who knows something?
And just nothing.
No.
And I think that's where the fundamental issue is. If they started doing celebrity geek type thing, boring people, then I think you'd have a big change here. But people just don't know these jobs.
I mean, yes, Brian Cox is only popular because he's so good looking. Mind you, his wife, have you heard his wife, who says, well, he might be every woman's dream, but I'm the one who has to pick up his socks. We must stop. I don't want to stop. It's been so interesting today. The whole day we've had all kinds of things coming out. And it's particularly due to our members who are from industry and companies who've really put a lot of information into the debate today. So many thanks to everyone, and especially our company associates, because it's been some really interesting stuff. And I don't want to stop here. There'll be things coming out on MirandaNet about how what the thing we're really interested in is what Marilyn calls crowdsourcing. Not only how can we share all our knowledge, but we will then undertake in MirandaNet to use it to influence government, to influence people, to influence all kinds. There's ways we can do it, and politely, you know, that's really important. So thank you so much for joining in today. Tomorrow is about professional development, and then the next day is particularly about crowdsourcing, and Saturday we've got many more teachers coming in, because of course they can't always, our members can't always get here, and we're talking about all kinds of things that teachers are keen on presenting. So that's where we are. And I've now got to get my ball gown on and go to the awards ceremony. So I'd better get on with that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on today. Yeah, I've got some.
And in physics we were doing What I need is
and that's what that does is there is something because there's nothing else that it becomes what and then you don't so for a teacher what we say is
something in reception which is probably behind them, and they'll be working in Czech around that now. And their first computer is here's a try with it, and that's the difference in Russia. And so the whole basis of their program is say different bigger sequencing.
Then everyone just does scratch.
I'm doing scratch and try with it.
But the other side of that,
if you had a 5-year-old, what would you want your work to do?
find out. So again, the culture I was brought up with, I was told all of the natural and then if that's the only thing they get
I don't know whether that is before or after, because we're working out teaching teachers since 8, 9, 10, whatever they're I haven't got anything on the topic. It's probably going to be something like slides every how do I put this all together?
should be on the south bank. Well, there are cultural differences. It is quite interesting. I was going out to check vocation school and they had a little thing with the railway system. They'd sort of finished with it, they rebuilt one school and had a public sector work how it all works. Really impressive. Considering again,
creating narrative, making it happen. And the hardest part is the timing. It's easy to do X, Y, Z timing. And so what I'm doing in the summer is putting together a website which has a library of structured stories. But there's millions of stories out there. But the teachers have got to and creating background
well, I think that's also
the English teacher. So what we're doing year 8 program. So they've got the music in their stage show. The art department in their own slides, their own background. Then they come up with their English stories. Together. So we already know that we've further to go. We're on the road there, and 2, 3 so the library will have hopefully set up the stories, selected messages as sort of simple, and then have a chat with the sector. I don't know yet, find out tomorrow when I get to the end. The stories will then be checked. I know they do a lot in Spain, so I'm going to contact those people in Spain that know these stories because I know what these languages.
You didn't know what it was, so you didn't really have a clue. So it's all symbolic. Where there was a language that exists, some problems solved, but not going to fly. But it was landing, it wasn't anything else.
That's a big issue. Yeah, one of my friends is developing. We did actually check some things like that.
And when the national pension came in, they checked out.
There isn't any real change. I'd like to have a lady from fundamentally, you go to
now, when we tried to use the whiteboards, that's what it says.
It's not much different.
Oh, you were back in. Really, suddenly.
An interest of state in some branch of application or but look, I think an equally valid case for the advice in my background, like those sensibilities from
that's partly why I've got a bit of some reservations about this pushing of the schools. I do believe it but perhaps it's people have died, so we just so suddenly there's this road to Damascus experience where computer science is going to revolutionise it. I'm slightly sceptical.
As far as I remember, the teachers teaching they got on kids that were programmed, getting out a lesson at the dinner hour.
And there was a problem when these first came to schools that private expert programs for teachers.
And then the reason I'm here is our students.
Well, some of us actually do both. Some of us do both. Study computational
I want them. You can see the stuff you've got primary, now secondary, and all the people who are going to
I will send you our curriculum and I'll send you computational brilliance together. Now, I have a slide.
So you can leave it broader and wait for trouble. So you can leave it 10 years. And then there's a trigger and then know where that was, so you can see what the rest of it relates to. Which you couldn't do. You could either use a chocolate or miles of paper. Or take away a doing that. So that was a simple. The only thing we had to do was write an assembly for 6 minutes or whatever it was, assemble to the relay in BBC Basic, because we had to program it, so it was the machine killed at the time otherwise. So
What was always the case, I think it's always very useful from a couple of research the really interesting stuff's all done in curriculum. I do it. School I just visiting in December. Made a web, got a weather tools in the attached a webcast. That's used as an extra curriculum.
even when I was at school, some of the most interesting stuff I did in the actual the sports books or whatever. Well, it's just that while you've got high stakes exams, the main focus and the big value system. Well, you have to
also this philosophy which is in allowing them to use they've got to know exactly what's coming up. It would be unfair. And as long as we keep that philosophy, we are going to produce. What we do is we turn computers into the computers. They are, instead of them learning to use computers, we're treating them as program that in and expect it to
Very good to meet you, Peter.
Yeah, the same plan, okay. Yeah, the very first talk was in I've said to them,